What's going on, everybody, and welcome back into the channel. Wanted to make a quick video talking about the Cardinals news that dropped earlier Sunday in a move that was kind of a long time coming, it feels like. The Cardinals DFA Giovanny Gallegos designate the longtime reliever for assignment. They recall Kyle Leahy from Memphis to join the 26-man roster in time for Game 3 against the Nationals as the Cardinals look to avoid the sweep at Busch Stadium on Sunday. But want to focus on Gio for this one, as we felt like for a while this was something that would make sense coming up to the trade deadline because of the struggles that Gio had earlier this season. Remember, he had a 12 ERA before they finally put him on the injured list, tried to figure out a way to basically get him off the major league roster without having to do the most drastic move, which comes today. But then his rehab assignment wasn't very strong. They did bring him back. He was being used in that sort of mop-up role that doesn't have a lot of utility. We've been talking on b-schaeff daily about there just not being a lot of value for the Cardinals to stash a guy at the bottom of the bullpen that you can really only trust for mop-up duty. Now, Gio, in that span, since he returned from the IL in late June, has a 2.31 ERA in 8 appearances over 11 and change innings. Pretty good, but the Cardinals just weren't going to get to a point, I think, where they would trust him with more meaningful innings. And I think that's rightfully so with the way that we had seen him perform, even in the numbers that he had put up recently. He had some strikeouts, had 4 strikeouts actually last night, but just not the consistency I think that you were used to seeing from Gio when he had his best stuff. The eye test was not particularly strong, even as the numbers weren't so bad over the past month for him. Now we'll see what ends up happening with Gallegos. I think there's a couple of different ways that this could go. The timing of this DFA means that, trade deadline is still not passed. The Cardinals could conceivably move him. Saw a tweet from John Denton earlier today where he reported that the move comes as the Cardinals are hoping to shed some salary ahead of the deadline to potentially add from the external. I think that's a little bit strange because the Cardinals should be able to make any reasonable move that they want as far as the budgetary concerns are considered. Maybe that's not the way ownership felt, according to the source that John Denton had. We'll see the way that it shakes out as far as that, because I don't know for sure that Gio is going to get claimed. The money is not exorbitant at this point. He had a $5.75 million contract for the season. Obviously, we're 2/3 of the way into the season at this point, so you're talking I would have to do some quick math, but around $2 million remaining on this year, and then there is a $500,000 buyout on next year's team option, which is obviously not going to be picked up by clearly the Cardinals at this point, or reasonably any team that would then trade for him, because it's, I think, $6.5 million for 2025. The numbers right now, 6.5 ERA for Gio. It just seems unlikely unless he just has a total renaissance wherever he may go next. So it is a bit of an interesting thing to see that the strategy from the Cardinals was to potentially try to shed some salary. We'll see if they get their wish on that. I kind of figured that any trade they would make, they would potentially have to kick in some cash. And you kind of think about it the way that the DeYoung deal went down last year, where they picked up Matt Swanson, who's currently closing games for the Springfield Cardinals down in Double-A, but he's a 25-year-old reliever, wasn't really considered a prospect when that deal went down, and DeYoung had some remaining salaries. So there are considerations that are financial as it pertains to this deal. So we'll see what ends up happening with Gio. But from the Cardinals' perspective and what that leaves behind in terms of their active roster and their 40-man roster, I think that's really the main focus here in my head, not as much as, well, do we have the financial resources and the budgetary room to make a move? I would hope that that's not the case for what the Cardinals are doing, but maybe that is the way they're thinking. Now you have a spot on the 40-man roster to kind of play with as a couple of days remain before the deadline. In terms of what the Cardinals might do with that spot, it does seem like relief pitcher would be a great area to target still. And it's not that you don't think Kyle Leahy can do a good job, but I think in terms of the quality depth that you're looking to have going into the final push, injuries can still happen after July 30th. That's the part that I think the Cardinals should be sort of gearing up for at this point, is to think that if there should be a rough August in terms of attrition to be it the bullpen, be it the rotation, you're still in a position, if you make some moves now, to be able to weather some additional storms that could come down the way. There's still a chance for the Cardinal bullpen to be pretty good without making additional moves, but I think you'd be relying more on injury luck and having guys like Jojo Romero and Andrew Kittredge, who we haven't seen be quite as sharp in recent weeks, maybe getting back to their early season form. And that's a lot of if, I think, involved in that thought process. So we'll see if the Cardinals are going to be aggressive here. I said on the Big Show on KTGR Friday about 5 p.m. that I thought before we join the Big Show on Monday, which would be about 4 p.m., I figured the Cardinals would make at least one trade. Now, is that going to be a Gallegos trade where they're basically dumping him elsewhere just to clear a spot, or is there a move that could happen that sees the Cardinals meaningfully add to the margins of their roster? Taking Gio off because he wasn't trusted to perform in those leverage roles anymore, and we all understand the reasons for that based on his performance. Taking him off, I think, could be the precursor to potentially putting somebody else on in that spot. But if you look around the game at the prices that are being paid right now for relief pitching, some top 100 prospects are going for these guys that teams are picking up. Jason Adam was just traded by the Tampa Bay Rays earlier today. I believe I saw that was a top 100 prospect that ended up going back to Tampa in that deal. People then look at that and say, well, man, you could probably get a lot for Ryan Helsley right now. I just do not get the sense the Cardinals are going to take that plunge, even with the recent downturn in their performance, 9 losses in their last 14 games. It would just sincerely surprise me to see the Cardinals, after they have basically been outspoken and saying they're going to look to add to this team, to do an about face because of a short stretch of time where they haven't performed. They're still in the wild card race. They're not currently in a wild card spot, though. So with teams around you adding, it would seem beneficial to the Cardinals to make sure that they're not getting left behind and stacking up the areas of their roster that they can afford to improve. I think a blockbuster deal at this point would feel unlikely, if only because we've just not got the sense that the Cardinals are going to trade the big name pieces that would be part of either their present in a case like a Gorman, or even thinking about a not too distant present / future in Jordan Walker, if they're going to bring him back at some point. Like that, those types of moves just seem unlikely to me for them to pull the trigger on something that drastic. And then you think about the moves that would be, a little bit more manageable, more reasonable. Even those types of names, guys that maybe could help you right now in your bullpen. What's that going to fetch in terms of prospects that you're going to have to relinquish as part of your future? Pitching prospects, the Cardinals don't have a ton in terms of guys in that top 100, and public prospect rankings are not the end all be all, certainly. Guys like Quinn Matthews are barely into the tail end of a top 100 at some services, but we have seen Quinn Matthews certainly raise his profile this season. I don't think the Cardinals would want to trade a Quinn Matthews, though. That's somebody that you hope, it seems like a workhorse, durable guy, could potentially end up in your rotation at the big league level a couple of years down the road. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Cardinals kind of weigh the balance of the pieces that other teams might actually covet and want from you in a trade that would look like a buy sort of move at the deadline for the Cardinals. Are those the moves that the Cardinals are willing to do? I think you could see more marginal moves, not necessarily exactly like just dumping Gio for whatever they might get for him, but potentially guys at the AAA level that we're not exactly sure where they might fit into the present or future of the Cardinals. What would teams think about a flyer on a Zach Thompson? What would teams think about investing in Ivan Herrera if the Cardinals are preferring Pedro Pages to be their backup? That's a guy that could have a fair bit of trade value when you think about the right-handed bat that he brings to a major league club. I think he is a major league ready bat. Only reason he's in AAA right now is probably for the defensive reasons, trying to get a handle on managing the run game, which is something Cardinal relievers have had a trouble doing right now in terms of holding runners. And so to have a guy who's had trouble throwing out base runners behind the plate is just not something the Cardinals want to do right now. But that doesn't mean they've given up on Ivan Herrera. Could he have trade value, though? And it takes talent to get talent has been sort of the mantra that I've been repeating. So is that something the Cardinals would, even if they're not crazy about the idea of moving on from a guy like that, is it something they may feel compelled to consider in order to make sure that they don't get left out of this trade deadline fray? A lot of consideration here to be had. Just a couple of days remaining. It's Sunday now. The deadline is just over 48 hours away. Doing some quick math, about 52 hours away as I record here. So let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on this Gio move. I've seen a lot of sentiment from folks that say, oh, this was a long time coming. It took too long to do, overdue. I understand that sentiment, but also wanted to make sure to highlight on a day like this that the Cardinals unequivocally won the Giovanny Gallegos trade when they sent Luke Voit to the New York Yankees back in 2018. Voit was a stud for the Yankees for a moment there, but he fizzled quickly. Gallegos was just the consistent, reliable, durable guy that you could hope for from the bullpen from 2019 to 2022. That's a span of 4 seasons. He was 4th in MLB in innings pitched by relievers throughout that time, and 6th overall among MLB relievers in those 4 seasons in Fangraphs, wins above replacement. Had like a 2.8 ERA, more strikeouts than innings pitched by a pretty good clip. So Gallegos was really, really good for the Cardinals for a long time. I don't think dancing on the grave is necessarily something that is too fair to him or makes a lot of sense from Cardinals fans. But I also understand that the decline had been stark. You wonder about the dawn of the pitch clock era, if that's something that really Gio was never really able to figure out. As remember, last year was the first year they had it. He was pitching in the World Baseball Classic at the beginning of 2023 during spring training, when you could have potentially been in spring trying to figure out the pitch clock, and they weren't using that in the World Baseball Classic at the time. So that's something that you kind of thought about. He never really got into a rhythm last season. Wasn't awful, but the days that he was bad, the days that he didn't have it, it was very clear in 2023 that he didn't have it. It seemed like anytime he'd give up one home run, you pretty much could bet that a second home run was going to be short behind. And then to begin this season, he had a 12 ERA after 5 or 6 weeks when the Cardinals finally had to say enough and put him on the IL with that shoulder impingement. It just wasn't working for him this season, but there were definitely a lot of good moments and good stretches from Gallegos for the bulk of his Cardinals career. I'm rooting to see him end up getting picked up by a contender somewhere, a team that's going to take a flyer on somebody that has a bulk of leverage experience, I should say. Is that something that, a team would pay a couple $1,000,000 for and claim him on waivers? Or do they perhaps wait until after he could potentially clear, if the Cardinals would decide, to outright release him? Then a team could pick him up for whatever financial implications they would choose. I think he's going to end up somewhere before too long, and I'd be rooting for it to be with a contender, just because you're not going to root against a guy like Giovanny Gallegos. He gave a lot to the Cardinals, a lot to St. Louis over the years that he was here, and so we'll see where he ends up next. But for the Cardinals, it's a turning of a page. He was the longest tenured reliever, I know for sure. I'd have to go back through the game logs to see if there was anybody. I know Miles Michaelis probably was around in that same 2018 season that Gio initially arrived. So maybe in the case of Michaelis, he's been around just a tad bit longer than Gio in the Cardinals organization. But yeah, I mean, Giovanny Gallegos, one of the longest tenured Cardinals, and that is no more. So let me know your thoughts on that, Cardinals fans, in the comments, as you're probably watching right now, or the Nationals game, the Cardinals Nationals on Sunday, or you've already seen that game. But let me know kind of where you're at. Obviously, things are going to move quick, so this video could be totally obsolete within 10 minutes if Gallegos is traded to the Royals, and we find out what the return is on that, if anything. So just keep it locked and loaded right here on the channel throughout the next few days, as we'll continue to bring you Cardinals coverage, Cardinals content, as we do every day throughout the season and really throughout the offseason. It's going to be hot and heavy all year round on the Brenden Schaeffer St. Louis Cardinals Rider channel. Appreciate you guys as always. We'll join you for later on this evening when the next episode of B-Schaeff Daily comes out, and you can subscribe to that podcast on Spotify as well. Appreciate you guys for watching, and we'll talk to you next time on the channel. Peace.